Welcome to the I Ching Cafe. My name is Belinda Davston, and this is the I Ching 101 series. I trust that you have been enjoying the playlist thus far and have found some useful topics to help you focus your thoughts and your learning related to the I Ching. So in this episode, I'm going to ask a big, bold, hairy question, which is impossible to answer in just one short video. And that is the question, how do I interpret the I Ching? Wow, big question. So you've cast the coins, you're working with a question, okay? And you've got maybe just one hexagram. If it's a locked hexagram, you've got two hexagrams, a beginning and an end one, and you've got some changing lines. How on earth do you work with this information? So I would encourage you that you follow along on the tutorials playlist where I take real world questions and I work through unpacking what that might mean and how you would work with the interpretation. It's the best way that I know how to demonstrate how I might approach working with a question. There are certainly lots of ways of working with interpretation. It's one that works for me, and if it works for you, that's really fantastic. And so that's a great resource of seeing different questions in context and working with real life situations to unpack how to work with the language and framing of the interpretation. It really is the magic. It is the hardest part of the whole I Ching journey, is being able to look at all this information and put it together into something that's meaningful, that can actually help you deal with the question that's in front of you, because you're asking a question because it's important to you. If you are asking the question on behalf of somebody else, it's important to them. Questions are important. We aren't asking silly questions most of the time, and you're more than welcome to ask silly questions because there's no judgment on that, right? So when we work with interpretation, there's a lot of different approaches, and find a way that works for you. What I'm going to share with you in this episode is a couple of ways that I think about interpretation that might just help you do the same. Okay. If you are a writer, you've done any kind of writing or any kind of movie work, you might be familiar with the concept of the 3-act play, okay, or the 3-act storyline, where every story we read in a book, we see in a movie, follows a bit of a formula around good story structure, okay. And the reason I'm sharing this is that I think about the I Ching in that way. When you're getting your hexagrams and your changing lines, it's bringing you a kind of a story, a kind of a picture, and you've got to actually then turn that story into something that's meaningful, that can be used as a means of development or insight or peace or whatever it is that's driving the questions in front of you. So in classic storytelling, there's always a hero that goes on a quest. Okay, there's a person that is going about their life, you know, they're on their life's journey, and something happens. Okay, that's called the situation. Something happens, and usually it's right at the beginning of the movie or the book, and that sets the tone for the big crisis that is to come. Okay, there's a big situation. We start with the situation. We start with seeing the character in his or her natural landscape, okay, their life, and then boom, something happens. Think about Die Hard, right? And Bruce Willis is going about his life, and then explosion, and then it's Christmas Eve or something like that. I don't know, I can't remember the details. But they're going about their life, and it's, you know, it's a celebratory time, and then suddenly there's this big situation. Okay, that sets the scene. Okay, that is now there's something, there's a problem that's intercepted into our lives. And so there's a journey the character goes on, right? And the character cannot fix the problem easily. So the problem presented in that crisis is not fixed by problem solving. The only way it can be fixed is by the character or this cast transforming in some fundamental way. And by going through an internal change, new tools become available that help the person transform and solve the problem. And usually, right at the tail end, there's some really good help, some friends, some tools, a hidden scroll, something comes at the last moment when you least expect it to come and help. So that is a classic story structure. And I see that in the I Ching. I see that in the opportunity to think about your interpretation in that way. your first hexagram you're going to cast with your coins or your heuristics or whatever method you're using or your app is often called your main hexagram or your present situation. So think about that as a way of mapping out where you're at, where you're at and what is happening. And what is happening. Your second hexagram is often known as the outcome hexagram, the relating hexagram, the transforming hexagram. If you've got changing lines, where the one is transforming to. So what I think about when I think of the story structure in the I Ching and our job of interpretation, when I look at the main hexagram, this is the situation, this is the challenge, that has presented itself to us in this question. I take the hexagram, and you can just take a book and take your key meanings out of it. There's a lot of, obviously, detail depending on which book you're using. You take a book, and you really sit with that hexagram, and you say there's two levels to a hexagram. There is what's called the inferior person, the lower self, and what's the superior person, the higher self. So you look at the situation, presented by your first hexagram, and you say, based on this hexagram, what would be the lower self challenge? Where am I being pushed to grow? Where am I resisting? Where is my lower self in the situation? And then you take the higher road and you say, what is this hexagram bringing to me, to the situation to show me where my higher self is needing to grow? So that's the higher self, the superior person, the master in this hexagram. And then we look at our changing lines and we look at our outcome hexagram. And it's really useful to take our changing lines and make a keyword or translate that into a sentence. And the sentence we're doing is the journey we have to go in this main hexagram to the outcome hexagram, the transforming elements that are bringing us an awareness to move us to the outcome. Now, we might not like the outcome hexagram, and I'd encourage you that if you get a hexagram, first or second, you don't just keep on asking the same question over and over again, We get into that paranoid state of just asking, because all we're doing is we're waiting for a better hexagram to come up to confirm what we want in the situation. So what we do, we take our changing lines and we see them as pathways, that are transforming the hero of our story, ourselves, or whoever you're asking about, from where you start the journey, the situation, to the end of the movie, the end of the book, where there is some kind of victory. Even if the hexagram at the end, the transforming second one, is not a nice hexagram, it encapsulates and has victory in it, because we can look at every hexagram from the lower self to the higher self. What does the lower self achieve through this hexagram, or what is the lower self trying to learn? And what does the higher self demonstrate as a result of this hexagram? So let's take an example. Hexagram 18, work on what has been spoiled. The lower self in this hexagram is to stay in chaos, to tolerate chaos, to try and solve the situation, to continue in this situation in a state of chaos. So our lower self is stuck in accepting chaos and not having put in the work to maintain order in this particular situation. The higher self, what does the higher self bring? It brings the superior person, that work and effort, sweating in the sun to clean up that garden is the only way to deal with this situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with my consciousness on areas where I tolerate chaos, and I'm going to transform them into embracing order and embracing putting in the work to look after the garden that's in front of us. So you can make some notes. What is the inferior person needing to learn? What does the superior person demonstrate? And that shows you the transition the situation is bringing to you. We work with the changing lines. We work with them in sequence, starting with the first one. Depending on the type of question you've asked, whether it's time period-based question or it's a relationship question, whatever the structure might be, work with them in a sequence, because the bottom one comes in first and they tend to evolve one into the other. Take what's written in the book and extract from it, even if it seems chaotic, a phrase. As the hero of the story and this journey, right? What is the transformation I need to go on to go from here to here, right? What is the journey? What is that change in perspective that I am needing to make in order to move forward? And then our outcome hexagram is what is the victory that we're being called to make. Now, I know there's going to be some comments on this episode related to how on earth do I apply a victory if I'm getting 39 obstruction or I'm getting 47 exhaustion? How do I see a victory in these horrible hexagrams? Okay, what we have to do is we have to see the gift that each hexagram brings us. So in this situation, the question we have asked on the piece of paper, right? The outcome, where we are transforming to, is learning how to master that outcome hexagram. That's where we land up. We land up being able to develop what is being shown in the outcome hexagram. If it is 47 exhaustion, the outcome is being able to work with creative ways of replenishing ourselves and mitigating exhaustion and learning how to accept that which we cannot change. That is a victory, okay? If we have 39 obstruction, the victory, the superior person, recognizes that helpers are needed to overcome the obstacle and that creative approaches are required. That is the victory. So, I know there can be lots of comments on how to apply this thinking to particular questions. However, take this idea is a transformation process. We start off with the first hexagram. We have changing lines that are taking us through a process, and there's a victory at the end. We are transformed. Our choice is whether we stay in the inferior person, coming out on the end hexagram, or we move into the superior person. And once you've got that picture, what I'd really encourage you to do before you race off to go and cast the coins again and ask the question again in a slightly different format, hoping for a better outcome, is to take all the bits that you've gone through, that you've read through, that you've worked with, and synthesize them into a single phrase, a single sentence. This ability to integrate all these data points into a single phrase, okay, into a single statement, an affirmation, okay, even, is unbelievably challenging and is one that takes practice, practice, practice. Please do not think that in a moment it's just going to be so easy. Because when you get those gnarly hexagrams coming in, how do I work with this? How do I interpret? Where's the victory here? I don't know. Work with it and practice it. And I hope that this gives you some useful application in taking all this kind of complexity that comes out of our hexagrams and changing lines and synthesize it into a very clear focus point. What, as a master, as a superior person, as a higher self, do I do in this situation? How do I approach the situation that I have asked about? What is the question calling me to do, to grow, to develop, and to expand my awareness? I hope that gave you some insight, and I look forward to hearing your work with applying the journey of the hero to your next I Ching question. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like and share if this was useful. And of course, if you are new to the channel, please do subscribe so that you get the weekly and monthly I Ching overviews into your app as soon as they are ready. And of course, I am also on the main socials and there's a podcast version too. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you at one of our regular episodes.